Hey, dude.
Hey,
You like when I call you dude?
whatever you want, Dad.
Oh, okay. Anyhow, so we'll get this out of the way right away. We have Paulino on
Absolutely.
tonight, right? Mr. Paranormal himself.
Yes.
And I don't think you've ever had the pleasure of either talking to him or listening to one of his shows, have you?
No, but you've told me he's one of the most respected people in the field.
Well, yeah, but he's also he's the guy. If you have a question, Paul's going to give you a damn answer. I don't care what it is. You're going to get an answer.
Which
And
is great.
yeah, and you're gonna buy into his answer too. He's very let's see, how would I put Paul? He's very confident.
Well,
And,
doesn't that come with 50 years of research?
well, no, I think it comes with 50 years of some kind of, he's had a lot of experiences. And so he's one of the people in the field that either needs to come to conclusions, but he does. He comes to conclusions on things. So it's really interesting. He has a different take on everything. I just absolutely love talking to him. Super interesting guy. So last week, do you remember we were talking about brown sound
Yes.
and all the little cracky jokes? But it brought back a bad memory for me because I swear to God, I've had two dreams about this car that I used to call the poop machine.
The poop machine.
No, no, no. I called it the poop mobile.
The mobile. The poop mobile.
Poop mobile. Okay. I need to tell this story because it's part of who I am and how this car changed my life. It was bad karma to begin with. Okay, so I had a '69 Mustang. You got to listen careful. I had the '69. It was a green Mustang convertible, just a beautiful car.
Good year.
Yep. And then I met this girl, and then I sold it to this girl, and then I married the girl.
You sold her a 69 and then you
No,
married
no,
her.
no, no, no. You're missing it. I sold her my car,
Yes.
and then I married her.
And then you married her.
Got the car back.
Oh, see.
Are you understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So then she didn't have a car. I of course claimed that baby right back.
Absolutely.
And the cash, of course. Well, so anyhow, so we got married. She got pregnant with Josh, your bro, and your half brother, I should say. And then I needed to get her a car. So I'm sitting there real thrifty. I go to instead of taking her to the new car lot, I start looking in the Herald, the local little newspaper. And they had this ad for this mint, I think it was a 1971 Ford Maverick four-door.
Ford Maverick four-door.
It was the ugliest car you've ever seen. Swear to God, it was the ugliest thing. But I'm like, oh no, it looks good. It looks good. I take her over to go see it. I'm trying to pawn this car off because she wasn't working. So I just figured, well, the four-door, she can haul the baby around. But I was being a cheapskate. This is my point.
You're being a cheapskate? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. But it came back to bite me in a big way. So I think it was day one, I parked the car in my driveway. And I had pulled out my mint Austin Healey 3000 Mach 2, all restored, beautiful car. Well, the first thing the poop mobile did is said, I'm going to attack that car. So it somehow came out of gear. The emergency brake let off. It was like Christine, and it started gliding right for my car.
Oh no!
And I've never run so fast in my life to hop in a car to push the brake from the inside of the house. And I made it with 1 inch from my car. Okay, so that's fine. But then it happened again. It started to attack like a neighbor's car.
Oh, jeez.
I get rammed into some car and put a dent in it. Even though it was in gear and it had one of those column shifters, 3-speed. I mean, it's the dumbest thing ever designed. 3-speed stick shift on the column. Okay. But my point is this car, it broke down constantly, cost me jillions of dollars. I could have bought a new car for what I put into that thing. But it did have nice brown paint, hence the Poopmobile. Oh, it was metallic brown paint. Even better yet.
Oh, geez.
That way it would glitter in the sun like poop, you know. So then I'm thinking, I got to get rid of this car. It's cursed, you know, it's just cursed. So I put an ad in the paper. First day, a guy comes and wants to look at it, and he comes and he buys it, and he doesn't even try to talk me down. He buys it and he takes off. You know, I can sign the title over to him or whatever. So then maybe a week later, I get an arrest warrant for me.
You get an arrest warrant.
You get an arrest warrant for me.
For you.
And I'm looking and I'm like, oh my God, it's the Poopmobile. The guy in the car didn't register it in his name, and he was out doing all sorts of naughty stuff with it. So they have a warrant out for my arrest. And I go and grab to look for the receipt, you know, the little tag.
The receipt, yep.
The tag that you get from the buyer. Anyhow, I couldn't read it. Couldn't read anything except Fridley. That's all I could read. Couldn't read anything.
Fridley. That was it.
That's a town, right? Southeast where Fridley is. Okay. So anyhow, so I'm like, I have no choice but to drive every street in Fridley.
Oh no, every street?
Every street over a 3-day period. Looking for the Poopmobile.
For the Poopmobile.
Yeah, that I sold for like $600. This thing is just haunting. No, I got a warrant out for my arrest. I'm 3 days now total, all day, 8 hours a day, because it's serious, you know. So anyhow, I finally find the Poopmobile.
You found it
on a street, and of course, there's a million houses on the street. So now I got to go knock on every house, looking for the owner of the Poopmobile. You know, that's hopefully I'm praying this guy answers the door, because boy, by this time I was pretty angry.
Oh yeah, furious.
I was pretty red, and I'm sure I was red in the face when he finally did answer the door after knocking on maybe 10 previous doors. Of course, it was the last house I knocked on. So anyhow, he answers the door. I just remember grabbing him by. This is the old days.
You get away with a lot more.
The men settled, you know, men differences, men ways.
Yes.
So I grabbed him by the shirt, and I grabbed him and I threw him in my car. And he knew I meant business, and he knew damn well what I wanted, you know. And I took him right to the police station.
So and he came. Was it a struggle?
Well, he got no. He wasn't a terribly huge guy. He was, you know, a little tiny bit smaller than me, but he knew I meant business. So anyhow, that's the Poopmobile story. And now you know what? I've literally had nightmares about that.
About the Poopmobile.
It caused trauma.
Yeah.
You know, I've never had any problem with the law. It was the only time I ever saw. I mean, that freaked me out. You know, whoever, you know, warrant for your arrest.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyhow, enough of the brown.
No.
So now that I told this story, maybe I won't have the dreams anymore, the nightmares. I've never told you that story.
No, you never told me that story.
Yeah, it's a true. Remember seeing the movie Christine? Did you ever see the movie Christine?
No, what is Christine?
It's a movie about a big red Chrysler that is all junk, and a kid restores it. But then I think the car starts restoring itself. And the car is possessed, and it affects the driver. He gets more and more like evil as every day he drives it, he becomes more evil. And the car just keeps fixing itself. And then the car starts killing his enemies that picked on him in school. That's Christine. I highly recommend the movie. It's a...
Is that a Stephen King?
I think it's a Stephen King movie. Yeah. Or Carpenter. Is there a guy named Carpenter?
Yeah, it was a John Carpenter.
John Carpenter movie.
He did The Thing.
Yeah, I think it's a John Carpenter movie. I think. I'm not sure though. But and just to gross people out, of course I did have to look up another Brown story, which led me to the Apollo 10 astronauts. And apparently when they go up in space, do you know how they defecate and so on?
Don't they wear an adult diaper?
No.
That's
what everybody thinks.
Because that's a myth.
I think it's a total myth. I mean, think about it. They're not going to make them sit in a little cramped little capsule while you're sitting on your own. Oh my God, no way. No, they have a bag
They have a bag.
They go in a bag.
How do they replace the bag?
What do you mean? Oh, they seal them. I would imagine they put a twist tie on it and throw it behind them like that.
Like, how do you get the next bag ready?
Well, you just probably have a bunch of bags, like a little baggie dispenser. Bag dispenser. I don't know. Well, I know. I'm just telling you what I know.
Someone engineered this.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Okay, so anyhow, so apparently during a flight, one single, and I'm just going to say the word TURD for those eating dinner right now, escaped from one of the bags and was floating around the capsule.
Oh no!
So they're all like goofing around, trying to like, no, it's not mine. It's not mine.
So the mobile is going around the capsule.
Well, yeah, the mobile. Yeah, yes, you know. So no one wanted to take ownership for this thing, which I wouldn't take ownership, you know, for it either. Would you? No. Would you want to go down in history for having one of your mobiles floating around in the space capsule?
No, you did everything to get this far, and now your reputation is destroyed.
Yeah, but apparently there were listeners on the ground that were listening either on ham radio or whatever they did back then. And apparently the ground crew was completely losing it and laughing their heads off. So, yeah. So, yeah, I want to look. I got to look at who's in our audience here if I can look real quick. There is a man. I got to tell a story of this man, and he's usually in our audience. I don't know, too many people look, but there's a guy named John Montoya, who I met up in Duluth by accident. Who has become, you know, friends. I've become friends, Facebook, and then of course in real life, you know, I've run into this guy everywhere. So I'm up in Duluth, and I'm at I think it was the Perry Unity convention.
Yeah, Perry Unity.
And I ran into this guy, and for some reason, I just felt the need to tease the guy. Just joke around with him.
Just give him a hard time.
I don't know. Yeah, I was kind of giving him a hard time. He gave me a hard time back, and we just laughed, whatever. Well, then I kept running into him in Duluth. Over and over and over.
Over and over.
I mean, it didn't matter where I went. I ran into this guy, John Montoya. He's like everywhere. And so I said, oh, we saw each other again. Oh, we ran into each other. We're laughing. And finally, I think I or he said, oh, God, imagine that. We ran it then later on the night again. So we had this little joke going between us, and we called it Imagine That. So to this day, every time he posts, he always puts some post to my face, and he puts Imagine That.
Imagine that.
I thought I would do a news section tonight in honor of John Montoya called Imagine That.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I thought I would. And I thought John might get a kick. And if he's not listening, that's just too bad. Imagine that he's not listening. So we'll start out with radioactive stuff, right? Okay. So apparently the notebooks used by Nobel Prize winning scientist Marie Curie. Apparently these books are still very radioactive. She did something with radioactivity, and I don't remember what it was. I think maybe she invented the X-ray or some damn thing. Can somebody look it up? Can you look it up?
Yeah.
It's spelled Curie. I knew this forever, and in my old age, I've forgotten what she did. But anyhow, so these books, it's been 90 years since her death, right? So apparently the historians have kept her books in a lead-lined box. Totally lead-lined.
Completely lead-lined.
Yeah, it's because they're radioactive. So anyhow, so they were so contaminated by radium that, and it says here, as a side note, radium has a half-life of 1,600 years. Okay.
1,000.
Powerful stuff, yeah. And so anyhow, so they're going to remain pretty dangerous for another 100 years. But anyhow, so the woman dies in 1934 of a plastic anemia, likely due to overexposure of radium. And I thought, well, imagine that.
Imagine that. She died of what she discovered.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah. So just imagine that.
Your passions kill you.
Yeah. So anyhow, so then a while back, remember the Ghostbusters show?
Yeah.
I think there's a sequel now. Is it out yet?
Yeah, I saw it recently. The movie.
Oh yeah.
It's called a requel where they bring back the old cast and they have the new people.
Requel. I've never heard that term.
Yeah.
I like that word, requel. That's
It's
kind of like when I talked about the Brown.
Yeah.
Requel.
It's old and it's new.
Yeah, same thing. Old and new. Okay, so anyhow, Ernie Hudson. Remember Ernie Hudson, who played? I think he was like one of the ambulance drivers, or
yeah, he was one of the guys in it.
He was Winston. He played Winston. Winston Ghostbuster.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Anyhow, they wanted to do an animated series, and so he auditioned for the part. Why wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
If you're part of the original cast, you think you would. And he auditioned for Winston.
And you'd think that's a slam dunk. They would have been excited.
Exactly. But he got turned down for the role.
He got turned down for his own character.
Winston got turned down for Winston. I'll think about it. I just definitely want you to imagine that.
Imagine that.
So anyhow, that one's for you, John, again. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else interesting here. Oh, pink butter. You ever heard of pink butter?
Pink butter? What is that? Is that like Himalayan salt butter?
Has anybody heard of pink butter? No, there was a thing. Okay, so food manufacturers, when they developed margarine, which was completely artificial, the people that made real butter wanted them and tried to get a law passed to get them. They had to make their butter pink.
So it stand out.
Right, so you couldn't get it mixed up with real butter.
Did that almost pass? Like that would have worked, I think.
My story. So food manufacturers developed a margarine in the late 1800s. Do not eat an artificial food that was developed in the 1800s. I warn everybody. Do not do it. Just don't do it. Okay, cannot be good for you. So they so they developed this stuff in the 1800s, and it stirred a national debate because it was one of the first fake foods. It's basically the tofu of the 1800s. Okay. So while margarine is naturally white, just pure white. So if you make margarine, don't add food coloring. It is white as white. So it's often dyed yellow nowadays, right?
Make it look like butter.
Yeah, it's kind of gross. It's dyed yellow. So anyhow, hold on here. I'm gonna get a drink of Gatorade because I've been dehydrated for 3 days, I think, from this heat.
And that's not a sponsored plug.
Mm-mm. No, it's actually they were out of my flavor, and I got the original flavor. It's like lemon lime. It's not that good. Anyhow, okay. So they dyed it yellow, but this infuriated farmers. They got really mad and they got together, right? And I can imagine, here they're trying to sell. They're barely making a living back then, trying to sell butter, and here comes this artificial butter that wasn't needed. There was no shortage of butter. So the farmers lobbied for rules that would prevent margarine from being dyed yellow. So in 1886, the Margarine Act was passed. Can you imagine these lawmakers?
The Margarine Act.
Think about, oh my God, can you imagine all the problems they even had back then? And, Congress and all these lawmakers, they're always doing the dumbest things. They're never doing what's needed. They're working on margarine.
Key issue.
Yeah, key issue. Well, but that's kind of how it works. The farmers probably donate to the cause of the lobbyists. So anyhow, in 1866, the Margarine Act was passed, placing expensive taxes on all margarine to appease the farmers. In addition, this is true, some states passed laws that margarine had to be dyed bright pink.
Some states did pass it.
Oh yeah. Bright pink. Just think about how gross that would be. Butter in your toast.
Oh yeah, no one would buy that crap.
No. And it was all done just to differentiate it from real butter. But the companies fought back.
William says it passed by a slim margin,
claiming the pink shade was a major deterrent. So the line, is that the companies fought back, claiming the pink shade was a major deterrent. So you can only imagine that they would fight back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
If I'm pushing margarine, I want it to be yellow.
It's another imagine that story. Okay, so you've seen the Die Hard movies, right?
Yeah. Which ones? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12?
50.
50.
So can you imagine Frank Sinatra playing Die Hard?
No,
Apparently,
I can't.
he was under contract, like a permanent. He had like first right of refusal because of a book that was written in 1968. It was a book by Roderick Thorpe. And Thorpe's next novel, while not a direct sequel, followed the same characters as the detective. When the studio set out to make Die Hard, they were contractually obligated to offer the role to 70-year-old Sinatra.
70-year-old Sinatra.
Can you imagine?
Could he have even done it?
I don't know.
That's a pretty physical role. But yeah, it wouldn't have worked.
Of course, he turned it down. So
yeah.
imagine that. He turned it down.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
There's some universe where he played that role.
Yeah, could have been in another universe. So, okay. So here's my last one. This one's kind of creepy. Horses actually used to have 5 twinkle toes. 5 toes, just like you, Alex.
5 toes. What happened?
Instead of hoofs, they had toes.
That is so
Think
weird.
about how weird that would look. Yeah, okay. So scientists have deducted that the toes disappeared as a result of evolution.
Evolution.
Yeah, with horses losing their first side toes first. Their middle toes combined to make one large hoof. So imagine that.
Imagine that.
Yep. Okay, one more. I'll just do one more. It's okay.
Just one more, and then we got Paul in the back room. We got to have him on. I'm excited.
Okay. Yeah, we only got 4 minutes left. Okay. Last but not least, female lions actually do 90% of the hunting for the families. Male lions instinctively protect their families, while females are responsible for feeding their pride. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
That was definitely the downhill.
Oh, it's all uphill.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Deborah, who won the hat last? I think it was last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Anyhow,
a couple weeks
she
ago.
sent a really nice thank you letter. It was very, very sweet.
That was sweet.
Thank you, Deborah. And we are going to continue to have trivia once a month only because we can't afford to have it every week yet.
Not yet.
If you guys would subscribe,
we'll give away more crap.
We could give away more crap every single. In fact, we could do it twice a show.
Yes.
If everybody would subscribe, please subscribe so we can give away crap. There's my argument. Really cool crap, right?
Yes.
Hats, hoodies, mugs, T-shirts with Untold Radio logo. And Alex said he'll autograph everything.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done talking.
You done?
Let's get
You're
Paul.
done? All right. You ready to have Paul on?
Yeah, let's get him early. And do not read his entire bio. Just call him Mr. Paranormal and bring him on.
Mr. Paranormal.
Well, you can read a little bit of his bio.
50 years of paranormal research.
It's crazy.
And he's one of the world's most experienced and controversial supernatural adventurers. Paul has the answers nobody else seems to have. Welcome aboard, Paul. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, better than nothing. How are you, Hajiceks?
Good.
Good. Us Hajiceks are doing good. How's the Enos doing?
Well, I had a little surgery there for carpal tunnel syndrome. Other than that, stitches come out tomorrow. I can't wait.
Oh,
I got my fingers back.
Well, don't just keep your hand down. Don't talk with your hand. You'll pop your stitches.
Right.
How's Ben? Ben Eno.
Ben's doing very well. Tomorrow night we plan to go to a lecture in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, of all places, where the Vatican's chief astronomer is going to be speaking.
Oh.
So we may have some questions for him. He's a priest.
What's the new telescope? Is the Webb what? Is it Jack Webb? No, it's not Jack Webb.
No, not Jack.
That was Dragnet.
Yeah. The Webb telescope, just launched. Amazing resolution on some very far away galaxies and things that we didn't even know were there. So the universe just got a lot bigger.
Yeah. And that thing is 1 million miles up, isn't it? Something like that.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Can you imagine, Alex? 1 million miles up.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Miles.
And we're looking at one universe, presumably. There. If I even look at the multiverse.
If I would have launched that rocket, Paul, that had that telescope on it, I would have tied some monofilament line on it and got a giant fishing reel and just let it go so I could pull it back in.
Well, you would have made 3M a lot of money.
I wonder how much 1 million feet of fishing line would cost. You have to go 20 pound.
I don't want to know.
I don't either. Anyhow, on to something more paranormal. So, what's kind of the latest thing, Paul? You're always so up on what's new and what's the newest thing or the craziest story you've heard or the newest thing that you think you've learned.
Well, every day I'm learning something. One of the more interesting phenomena that's going on lately has to do with the Pentagon and the various projects now to examine the ATIP, I should say, the UAP phenomena or UFO phenomenon.
Right.
And they're supposedly including the paranormal and psychic implications of these things. Now, they're a little late. I was working on that in the 1970s when I started to find that people would experience UFOs, sometimes during things that were supposed to be just hauntings. And you discover stuff like that when you look outside. You talk about outside the box. When you look outside the house,
right?
You look at the yard, and if you can talk to the neighbors, you would almost inevitably find that they had stuff going on too. And now and then somebody said, well, just to be honest with you, I saw a UFO land right in that field next to the quote-unquote haunted house. So I said, there's a lot more to this than what people think there is. So Ben and I guess Ben was on your show recently. My son Ben and I. It's nice to see you working with your son too. We were involved in what we refer to as flap areas, and we have actually had to come up with an entirely new vocabulary just to talk about these things from our point of view, which is that these things are a result of the interaction of parallel realities in what is known as the Everett universes or the multiverse. This is what we see in the paranormal realm. And again, by the end of the 70s, I was really totally confused because the old ideas just didn't add up. They weren't good enough, dead people and this sort of thing and all. That didn't account for the physical nature of many of these things. And that's when we started to look at this. Most recently, we've been, of course, coming out of 2 years of COVID, we've kind of been not grounded, but limited to more local cases, such as the Bridgewater Triangle, which is quite near us in Massachusetts. As a matter of fact, I believe President Biden was in it today because he was visiting Somerset, Massachusetts, kind of right on the edge there.
Yeah.
And if you go up into the Freetown State Forest, the Coppicut Reservoir, and this sort of areas, all kinds of strange things seem to be happening. Now everybody talks about.
Have there been any more missing people in the triangle recently?
Not recently, but it is known as a place where people have vanished. But of course, it's also known as a place where the mob will do you in as well. And it's got a terrible history of cult activity and involvement by the organized crime. So it's very difficult to tell who disappears, why, and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest things, certainly, that came to my attention recently, and we were working out there with Alexander Petikoff. I don't know if he's been on your show, but he should be.
Yeah. We talked to Alex literally last night.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I would have listened. Yeah. So he was out there, and then we were interviewing and this sort of thing about really strange things, and it's the only time I had ever run into a case where apparently, well, people thought it was a puckwudgie. All right, now puckwudgies are not common in our research in these flap areas. However, they are common apparently in the Bridgewater Triangle, and what they are is supposed to be little people. And even the First Nations were talking about them at one point. As a matter of fact, the word Pukwudgie probably comes from the Algonquian language group Pukwudgie, which the natives, which means little people.
Are these like scaled down, like just regular people, but scaled way down, or do they have like ugly, big, bald heads or something?
It depends who you talk to. The allergies are terrible this year. The fellow I interviewed him after his experience in 2015. He saw a little man in kind of grayish green clothing who looked relatively human, and his dog saw it too because he thought he'd gone bye-bye, but the dog also saw this thing, motioning him off the dirt road to come into the woods. This is right in the Freetown State Forest. Now, he, needless to say, considered retreat to be the better part of valor and never went back there. But interestingly, 5 years before that, Ben and I had been almost literally on that spot and had obtained photographs of some very odd, what appear to be little adult human beings.
Really?
And these can be seen, if anybody wants to, at newenglandghosts.com, which is our official website aside from the show site. And if you go to the Bridgewater Triangle under the case studies, those photographs are in there, and they're around on the internet as well. There was one that appeared to be a perfectly formed adult face with a monastic style brown cowl, as if it was a monk of some kind. And then there was another full figured person of a woman appeared to be dressed in furs. Now, we make no claims about these things being legitimate, but I was trained in the military in intelligence photography, so it was really strange for me to note that you don't have flesh tones in our latitude anyway, very commonly in the woods, unless it's some kind of fungus. So that's why these things stood out. You have to be very careful.
What do you mean flesh tones? What do you?
Well, like you and me.
Oh,
I wouldn't see Doug's face in
but
the
not
woods.
like Alex.
No, that's too young. I wouldn't see Doug's face in the woods ordinarily. The color of your face, unless it was usually some kind of plant life.
Right.
But that was not the case here because we looked, and it was just really amazing to see that. And again, we make no claims, but it's knocked people who are experts, off their seats when they've seen these. Or people can go online and see it.
How often do people see these things or report these things? Every year?
Usually get 4 or 5 times a year. Someone will say as a rule. The fellow I was referring to when I was interviewing with Alexander Petikoff was a man who apparently saw what is interpreted as a puckwudgie. But I think it was a child or teenage Bigfoot, in my opinion. So, because what happened was he was walking his dog, and this is in a relatively populated area, right on the edge of the woods. This is a 220-acre wilderness area within sight of Boston. A lot of people are amazed by that. It's like the Pine Barrens in New Jersey are not all that far from New York City, but they're wilderness area. Right. So he was walking his dog at night. Dog saw it too. Small figure, which appeared to try to speak to him in English.
In English.
Yeah. And it said, it said, want you, like we want you, that kind of thing. And it wanted him to, and saying, come, like come with me.
Come with me.
Yeah, well, like we're gonna do that.
Not me.
Well,
So
why is it that small creatures are so much creepier than tall, big creatures?
I don't know.
There's something
It's true.
creepy
It's really
about little things.
very creepy. Yeah, indeed.
Mm.
So as a result, I mean, he never went walking in that area again. He
Oh,
doesn't
boy.
live there anymore, as a matter of fact. But that was near the town of Rehoboth, and
Jeez.
that was something that we found when speaking to him. So very, very strange. But I never run into reports of either a Pukwudgie or a Bigfoot, whatever it was, actually attempting to speak.
Yeah.
Well, there have been efforts in communication, and people hear about Bigfoot making vocalizations and this sort of thing. But you usually got Bobo out there in the woods, it's generally not English.
Hmm.
So
do you, Paul, do you think that Bigfoot and UFOs and the paranormal are all intertwined together in some way, shape, or form?
yeah, definitely, and apparently so does the Pentagon, from what we were saying earlier. There were people think that there's just UFOs that are covered up. I think the paranormal in general is the subject of government secrecy. For example, I spoke with a member, and this is way back in 1980 when Mount St. Helens erupted, state of Washington. I spoke with someone I happened to know in the Washington National Guard, and they said the regular army was out picking up Bigfoot bodies all over the mountain after the eruption. Now, again, I have no independent corroboration of that, but I've heard similar things. There seems to be secrecy surrounding that as well. I think we get a lot of grief. For example, people, there have been producers who've tried to make a series or a docudrama or something out of our theories, which are a little different. We think the whole paranormal world is the interaction of multiple parallel realities, and I think that that there have been people. For example, there was one major production company that had done a sizzler reel, as it's called. And Doug, you know all about this.
Yes, a sizzle reel.
Yeah, sizzle reel or whatever it is.
Yeah, I like your word sizzler reel though.
Well, you get hamburgers with that.
Yeah, I like it better.
So in any case, we had Meryl Streep involved in the sizzle reel, and
Beautiful.
because she had a haunted house in the Litchfield Triangle, as we call
She
it.
did. Oh,
Somebody deliberately sent out the wrong one. Well, one of the producers resigned over this, and there had been, so we were told, outside influence. So some third party came in and said, "You can't do this," and stomped on it. So why would that happen? Well, perhaps because the real secret here is not that we've got friends from some other planet out there, but that they are not from out there. They're right next to us all the time, as are our greatest fears and our greatest loves or whatever in these Everett universes, these parallel realities in which all outcomes are somewhere or somewhen in concrete reality.
But are we over there then in these other realities? Are we there?
Yeah, there apparently are different versions of ourselves.
Do they freak out when they see us? Is my house?
Well, you put your foot right in it there, Doug. Our experience is that we'll go into a house and you get the ghost is doing this and everything is scaring us. Well, very often the ghost or ghosts think we're ghosts haunting them.
Yeah, I wonder that. Yeah.
Because they see us as we see them. Cloudy figures, glowing figures. Why? Because we're looking through the membranes or brains, as a physicist would say, into which are what? Charged particles, plasma, right across into another reality where we may be present. I mean, by the end of the 70s, I was seeing people were coming to me with stories about seeing ghosts of themselves, the doppelganger thing, or people were seeing ghosts of people who hadn't died yet. I mean, what was that about? So I said, this is a lot deeper than the old ideas, and I think that this multiverse thing begins to explain it.
Well, I mean, isn't it true that that $22 million that the Pentagon gave away that was supposed to go towards UFOs all went to Skinwalker Ranch to study the paranormal activity?
Yeah, well, NIDS, the whole Bigelow Lab thing was which suddenly ended in the 90s, oddly enough, and because now you have another group who will not let us near that place for some reason. Because we don't need it, because we know the other places we're working on. But
would you like to go to the Skinwalker Ranch?
I'd very much like to. George Knapp is acquainted with us. We've been on the Coast to Coast with him, and we'd love to get involved in that. I think it's right up our street, and yeah, I really like it. Yeah, we're working on 6 areas like that right now.
Yeah, I would like to go there too. My nephew is a really good friend of Brandon Fugel's.
Oh, okay.
So I might have an in.
Well, that'll be good. Well, actually, we have James Keenan on our show in a couple of weeks. So we'll use that. We have an in up at Oak Island with Matty Blake. He lives here in Rhode Island, and he's come to our studio and done the show. And he said, "Hey, we ever want to get up there?" So we're all set with Oak Island and the Treasure area. But Skinwalker Ranch, we'd be very interested in.
By the way, Alex, I don't want to change the subject, but John Montoya just came in to the room. Imagine that guy.
Imagine that.
So anyhow,
yeah, there you go.
Anyhow, so John, you got when you get time, listen to the first part of the show. We dedicated the whole damn thing to you. So you missed a good one. Anyhow, so but if they did that 22 million, Paul, back in, I mean, that wasn't that long ago.
It was 08 or 09.
They've been throwing money at this problem forever. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, the government does that. The question is, what are they throwing money at? Do we really know everything that's going on in these projects? Do they know everything that's going on in these projects? I mean, everybody saw, and the whole disclosure argument is fascinating. And I said, it's like, I mean, Ben and I are on these panels all the time at UFO conferences. And we'll say, everybody will say, oh, it's going to be this year, and next year you have disclosure. The government's going to tell what it knows about UFOs. They'll get to us, and I'll say, show of hands, who here believes what the government says? The whole audience groans, right?
Right.
And there's always an agenda. First of all, there is no the government. All right. It's a bunch of competing agencies with different agendas and all kinds of turf battles and all this sort of
Well,
thing.
even within a department or an agency, there's going to be a ton of layers of bureaucratic people that are going to be, oh my God, competing and hiding secrets. And
exactly. And then you get into the international scene. You've got some governments like Brazil that tend to be more open, or even Russia has always been more open. Others maybe not so much. So it's chaos out there.
They just have smaller governments, John.
Well,
they just have smaller governments. They have 3 people versus 10,000 people in a department.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
The Canadian government is a good example. Now they're not, they're no prizes when it comes to being totally open, but they are more flexible. And I think people know what's going on. But the U.S. government is just so enormous. It's that's the thing.
I want to change the subject because I got so much to cover. Do you think that religion and the paranormal are in conflict with each other? Do you think they harmonize? Do you think if you believe in one, you can't believe in the other one?
Well, I get that all the time because I spent many years studying for the priesthood. Probably fortunately for the church or myself, I was never ordained, but I got most of the training in not only the Roman Catholic, but the Eastern Orthodox Church as well. So I kind of 2 Eastern and Western points of view. I think that when you look at the face of it, or I should say the origins of both, there is and should not be any conflict. Because I always say, had there not been questions to answer, had there not been mysteries, had there not been difficult concepts in the beginning of our species, whenever, wherever that was, there would be no religion, and there would be no paranormal. So and there would be no science. So I think that the paranormal, the wondering, the thinking that we're talking to supernatural beings, the experiences of the psychic mind, uh, those were, I think, the origins of both religion and science.
Right. So what you're saying is, I mean, to summarize, if it wasn't for the paranormal, religion may not even have existed.
Well, not in its current form anyway. But of course, as the time goes by, you have baggage upon baggage upon baggage, and it takes on a life of its own, and it loses its way, and we end up with all these conflicts. Science and religion too,
Yeah.
which for really millennia, science and religion pretty much the same thing. There was no conflict. There was only in the rise of fundamentalism, which created the so-called conflict between science and religion.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah, I think religion has a place there, and I think it's there's no reason for them to be arguing as they do, because people don't understand where the roots are.
Have UFOs now dropped out of the paranormal category, or do you think they're even more in that category?
I think they're even more in that category. As I say, from what we're hearing out of the Pentagon, which is not a lot, there appear to be great interest in the paranormal implications and the psychic factors involved in UFO. Now, I recently joined the experiencer resource team of MUFON, and as one of the paranormal, honchos, to when people come along and have, they have abduction experience, and all of a sudden their dishes start flying around their dining room. So things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with the UFO phenomenon.
And this is for MUFON.
Oh yeah.
Wow. So
they keep encountering that.
When did that change?
I started to see it maybe start to inch along maybe 10 years ago. And then by 4 or 5 years ago, it's relatively recent, there was an open-mindedness to this. Now, the funny thing is that we have always been welcome at UFO conferences. The paranormal people don't like us so much because we're bad for business. We question all their theories. But the UFO people, I think, are much more open-minded. And many of them are experiencers themselves and have had these things happen to them. The whole Skinwalker Ranch / Flap area phenomenon it involves multiple types of paranormal experiences, not just UFO sightings or encounters. So I think the whole area is getting more part of the paranormal and realizing that there are what are now known as crossover phenomena that occur when you're an experiencer.
So Paul, because you talked about how a ghost could just be someone from a different dimension. So do you think certain groups of people or entities or whatever are intentionally crossing over through some sort of technology or psychic? I don't know how you would do it, right? But like intentionally going to different dimensions across from each other.
Yeah, what if everything's just technology that we don't have?
Well, I don't know if technology. There's some indication that technology fades into the background here. If you talk with shaman and people who are from the indigenous world, they don't have technology for time travel, but they do it. When I was in Australia in '79, many years ago, I spent some time with a Australian Aboriginal elder known as Mindalooey. Little guy, I bought him a lot of sodas because I was there on the line of duty. I was waiting for extraction, and we were on the porch of this old store way the heck outside Melbourne. And he said, I was telling him, I was really strange impressions I was getting from the parent. He said, you're on the right track. That's what we do. We move from world to world. We put it in different terms, but that's how that would happen. And he said, so I think that's what's now. I think everyone knew that, our remote ancestors, but now the government is starting to catch up, I think, with some of that. So I think we're dealing with parallel realities.
Paul, why can't we get 22 million each to do some paranormal?
Well, I ask that question every day. I mean, yeah, exactly. That we could team up. I don't know, but
think what me and you could do with $44 million to research paranormal.
I know it. I know it.
It is actually, and I joke, but I'm actually serious.
Yeah, I know it.
And we could do it in a Lamborghini too.
Well, yeah, we could drive a Lamborghini while we're doing the research. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to be able to. I'm still a working journalist. I consider the paranormal part of my work as a journalist. I try to use the same investigative techniques, but I also read about history and housing issues. So I always joke, if you're, you got a haunted house and you're overregulated contractor in a historic area, I'm your guy. But anyway, that's all that kind of money would be great.
I did hear that they are reaching out to more and more civilians.
Well, we'll see. Yeah,
I've heard the rumors.
Nobody's reached out to me yet.
Well, not you, but
well, not you either. Apparently,
me either. Or Alex.
I don't have $1. So.
I think there's a reality.
But there are rumors floating around right now that they are reaching out to some high-profile civilians that are creative to see what they can do and what they can work on. And then,
well, anything is possible, and we'll see. But I'm impressed by there being some openness now about this. I don't know if I trust it entirely. Again, there's always some agenda, and the whole disclosure thing. If they do release information, then they release some documents, etc. I've yet to see anything we didn't know already. Have you?
No, maybe a paranormal lockdown is coming.
Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? That was something that we kept running into during the lockdowns. We had a long distance case in England where the woman apparently was in a house that had a parasite problem. And Alex, you were asking about this. There are entities that come through deliberately. I think we're all multiversal creatures. For example, I worked in psychiatric hospitals in a pastoral capacity when I was studying for the priesthood. And I just got the impression that many of the people who've been diagnosed schizophrenic were actually living in real worlds.
Yeah, that's what occurred to me many years ago.
Yeah, I think you were right. And I've addressed groups of psychiatrists on this, and they will, the steam comes out of the ears and their eyes turn red. But many of them come up to me afterwards in private and will say, I've often suspected the same thing, but if I said that, I'd lose my job.
Yeah, of course.
So anyway, the politics and all. And
let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's kind of dwell on the schizophrenia, because it's just the experiences that they're having are so real. And it seems odd that the brain could make up some of the things that they experience of that kind of fear.
Well, as I always say, why is it that Mozart was able to sit down at the age of 4 and start composing these brilliant piano concerti?
Yeah.
4-year-old kid. Because if this approach is correct, because he is aware of where he already, I don't even use the word was, because it's all simultaneous, apparently. Special theory of relativity, that where he was already a brilliant composer and was in touch with that part of himself where he's already doing that. I think that's just a hint of what happens with many people. Where do we get our ideas? Where does our imagination come from? Yeah, stimuli that we will run into with life, but there seems to be more to it than that. So here I am at the St. Lawrence State Hospital in Ogdensburg, New York, near my seminary. It's 1973, and I was there in a pastoral capacity, and the doctor, one of the doctors said, you have to come meet this guy. You hear the jokes about a guy who thinks he's Napoleon. Well, we actually have a guy who thinks he's Napoleon, and he was an inpatient. Those days there were more inpatients. And I went in to meet him, and we had the most fascinating conversation. An elderly man, had other medical difficulties as well. He was pretty much bedridden. And he went on about, Waterloo, Borodino, all these various, battles that Napoleon had fought, as if he was there. It was amazing just to listen to him.
I had a friend, Paul, that used to hypnotize schizophrenia patients. And he claimed, after he had done this for 4 years, that he was 100% also convinced, because he was getting knowledge from 3 or 4 different people from one person under hypnosis.
Right. Yeah.
He was hearing them speak languages, talk about other cultures, history. And yet the person in real life had, no knowledge of that. And he was just absolutely convinced these people had one foot in numerous realities.
I think that's true. Well, the whole phenomenon of dissociative identity syndrome, the multiple personalities thing, I've actually heard, and this is not in the context of any kind of possession or exorcism, as it was interpreted. The person with different voices, different personalities, very clearly, in my opinion, that this was, because I'm a 21-year-old seminary student, like they're going to listen to me, but there seem to be multiple worlds certainly going on here. During the exorcisms, I was assisting a priest on the hush, of course, who was the diocesan exorcist. Every diocese has one. And I was assisting him. He knew I was working with Ed and Lorraine Warren and this sort of thing. And he literally would deal with these through the ritual of exorcism. And I just got the impression that this is all wrong too. That these things were multiversal creatures. I hadn't come to those concepts quite yet, but I was getting the impression that these things were living beings. They had nothing to do with Satan as such.
Right.
They were feeding on this. They were parasitical, and they were pushing our buttons, and we were giving them. They were feeding on us, and I really got that impression. And again, this was not the proper theology. And I kind of went to Father Lawrence, the priest I was working with, and we would talk a great deal after any of these experiences. And I couldn't quite bring myself to articulate that thought just yet. But looking back on it, I think that's really what was happening. We're dealing with parasitical entities.
Can you go through the symptoms of somebody that may have a parasite, one of these parasitical creatures inside them?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they're inside them.
Yeah,
I know what you mean. Yeah, the whole possession thing was strange in the sense that I really get the impression, and I've never changed this opinion, excuse me, that these people tacitly agree to bond with these entities. And because I've noticed that they almost seem to enjoy it, excuse me, in some cases, in poltergeist cases, such as the famous Bridgeport case, beg your pardon, of 1974 in Connecticut. The little girl, Marcy, was kind of enjoying all the notoriety she was getting. Now, whether I don't know if she was this whole agent thing that parapsychologists talk about, the agent, particularly a kid about to go through puberty, produces the poltergeist. I don't buy that anymore. But nevertheless, there seems to be an element of bonding here. I think they find what we call the intersect point, where they are this person at some, even if it's a remote corner of the multiverse, all outcomes are out there. I'm you, you're me. Alex is a really nice kind of guy. I'm sure he is now, but he's I'm trying to think of somebody really nice. There aren't that many nice people anymore. But then, but that sort of thing. And we share this consciousness. This is apparently how it really is. So they're not only different versions of ourselves, but the whole thing with the bonding with the parasite that we call possession, I think is exactly what that is.
But what are some, okay, but there's people I know, I don't know them, but I've read some stuff about that suddenly their personality changes, things start happening to their health, la, 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 la. Can you give us a laundry list of things that a person who may have some type of a thing latched onto them? And I'm talking about God knows what thing.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Can you give us a laundry list?
First of all, one of the things I learned in the hospital work was that, and in fact, the seminary at that time was very sympathetic to what I was doing. They set up a special course for me in abnormal psychology so that I could tell who's nuts and who's haunted.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that those things are intertwined. So when you have people change, people change. They're not static. But on the other hand, if you're getting the impression that there's a presence there, something alien, and I emphasize the term alien, because that's the impression I've gotten from these parasites, and I mean alien in a very broad sense of the term, then you may have a parasitical influence. There are parasites that...
Well, I'm going to interrupt you. Would it cause things like their taste to change, the foods they like to change, things like
possibly
that? Okay,
but that's not necessarily parasites. You could very easily be in contact with a version of yourself that likes asparagus. Okay, there are also factors such as organ donors. When you receive an organ from someone else, there are many cases where people seem to pick up the tastes of that person. Now that's unusual. Most people do not receive other organs, but I'm just giving you examples of other things that could explain that. I think you really have to be very careful about assuming that a parasite is involved. You have to eliminate every other medical or psychological factor there. People do change, but I know what you mean when you have radical changes, when people become very extremely negative, this sort of thing. I think it's possible that one factor may be parasitical influence. I think that's also true in families, in the halls of government even. Now, you don't want to get nuts here because people are responsible for what they do and how they live their lives. But when a parasite is there pushing buttons, and we've identified several different species of these things that operate in different ways. They seem to have a culture. I'm not sure what part of the multiverse they are native to, but we apparently are one of their hunting grounds. We've seen them hunting in several different worlds at the same time, and they seem to be very adept at this. Probably the worst ones are the ones who come in and will attempt to bond with the host in the sense of pretending to be a loved one. We've had cases where the parasite has pretended to be a lover from a quote unquote former life. Now, the problem with former lives is when you have in reincarnation and all that, you've got problems with the time being understood in the old way. Now, special relativity, Einstein's theory there, and the findings of quantum mechanics seem to indicate that time is all, there is no past, there is no future, it's all simultaneous. It's a matter of our consciousness. So anybody who's trying to pretend to be somebody from your past, and in a parasite sense, and there really is no past in our point of view. So that's a red flag. But this thing, I remember one case where the woman would wake up with hands around her neck, and she would write poems, love poems to the thing, and it was feeding on her all the time. And this seems to be the whole MO of some of these things. Others, we call them the farmers, will sort of stay back, live with your family. You might feel a presence now and then. You might feel nothing. And they will feed upon whatever happens in the family. They will usually work in groups. So you may have no indication whatever, no evidence in the changing personalities or anything of this kind that you're having a problem with a parasite. So And at the other end, you have the brats, as we call them, who are two-dimensional thinkers. They would correspond to the tricksters of folklore, and they all kinds of, they push you down the stairs. Your chairs will pile up on your table, as in some of these poltergeist things. So it all depends on the parasite and the person, and how they can get the food that they want out of this. But the trouble is too, I really think you need to examine the situation and eliminate all other possibilities.
Paul, sorry to interrupt, but what do you
Yeah.
mean by feeding? Are you talking about like mental energy? Are you talking about like physically draining someone of vitality?
Yeah, kind of all of that. They seem to feed, and I can't put a really scientific finger on this, on negative energy. Whatever divides, whatever causes hatred, whatever is negative. And this is what they seem to feed on. Our advice to people, and this is good advice for anybody, for any family, whether they're parasites or not, the best way is prevention to avoid problems. And you do that by coming together, doing simple things, laughing, but not at each other. Humor is very powerful. Faith, love, and just living a sort of simple life together. That repels parasites in our experience. So whatever it is, they're feeding on the negative, and they are repelled by the positive, and they'll go generally seek greater pastures, or they'll go dormant. We've had parasites attached to the land, and they've had very positive people moved into a house or an area, and they have no problems because the parasite has nothing to eat. Sometimes they'll leave, sometimes they can't leave, sometimes they'll go dormant and then wake up again when some Charles Manson or somebody moves it.
Yeah, have you ever seen one of these things leave a body?
No, I am not sure that's quite how it works.
Okay.
There have been, the whole body thing is the island theory is something we have a problem with. We being Ben and myself. The island theory is that everything we are is contained within our bodies. Our brain, our soul, our mind is all in here. Well, apparently it's not. It's non-local. Our consciousness is non-local. So you can be connected, and this is quantum mechanics. You can be connected with another being, another version of yourself that, in spatially speaking, is billions of light years away. So but that there certainly do seem to be cases, and I have seen them, where something does seem to take over someone, particularly in mediumistic situations, and they will speak and all this sort of thing. I still think it's an identity point. I think it goes beyond the physical. So I could be wrong about that, but I have not. I have seen parasites with the naked eye. We have photographs of them, but I've never seen one leaving a body. One of the most dramatic was in 1998, dealing with a case in Rhode Island. And they seem to, regardless of the species, move from person to person in a family. They were picking on the woman in this particular household. And that was what it is when I came into this. Ben hadn't even joined me yet. And I went out into the yard, and I felt a tremendous electrical field. I'm not afraid of these things. And when they know you're not afraid, they're afraid of you, generally. I walked down toward the center of it, and there it was. It was like a bolt of lightning with arms. And I later got a photograph of it. And it went running off to the right when I approached it. Where or when it went, I don't know. But I felt that was my introduction to Mr. Parasite. There were two of them. One was kind of dominated by the other. And when it couldn't get I told the woman, we do the positive thing. We repel them with positive energy, with love. The whole family came together. And the thing got so frustrated, it would pace up and down outside their bedroom at night. And they could hear it. Then it went after the little girl, but they knew what they were doing by this time. So it kind of went dormant. The last time I was over there, and our cases go on for years. We don't just, swoop in, with fancy equipment and do all, and then we're gone 2 days later.
I mean, okay. Let me clarify. Would you call this some kind of exorcism? What you guys were doing?
Not in any formal sense.
Okay.
Exorcism is a term loaded with
Baggage.
it's got a fuse on it.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, particularly with the religious context, in the exorcisms that we were involved in 1973 and 4, they were using the Roman ritual of exorcism, which includes 3 exorcisms and a demand that the demon tell you its name. And I get that because Jesus used to do it that way in the Gospels. So I asked Father Lawrence, I said, how do you know the thing's telling the truth? It's a demon, for crying out loud. And he said, well, it's bound by the power of Christ to tell the truth. So, I bought that, but I swear I've run into the same demon, if you will, or parasite, in several cases, widely separated in time and space. But in this case, this thing said its name was Chow. This was 1973, State Hospital, upstate New York. The girl's name was Barbara. It was very upsetting for me personally because the thing when it's finally said its name by command of the priest, I, in my mind, said, yeah, right. I didn't believe it. So apparently it was aware of that. And out it comes with something in a strange language that was apparently meant for me. And I didn't know what it was. I was not allowed to record these things. I would get back to school and take notes. But the doctor recorded the whole thing. And he had to look it up, what language it was. And at the end of the year, in May, late May, Father Lawrence called me into his room, as we often spoke. And he said, I can't let you go home this summer I just don't feel right without telling you what that thing said. And as you can imagine, that this was very difficult. Had this been in English, I would have ended up a patient there myself. But it said, I was there when your father killed himself. I witnessed my father's suicide at 7 years old. And I told him to do it, the thing said, in Malay. So I don't know whether Father Lawrence expected me to just bow out then and there. I think he hoped that maybe someday I would become a priest and an exorcist somewhere. And he liked Ed and Lorraine Warren, who came up to the seminary at their own expense to speak to the student body. And Ed was closeted with Father Lawrence for a couple of hours. But in any case, that was probably the most upsetting moment I've ever had in the paranormal.
Yeah,
this is what they do, these things. Because they're multiversal creatures, the thing obviously had awareness of this poor 7-year-old kid in 1961 standing, looking at his father on the ground, on a cold January evening. But, it was... why it wasn't in English, I don't know, because I would have lost it. So this is the kind of thing
was evil. So this was an evil creature then.
Well, what do you mean by evil? I mean, if it's bad for us, we generally think of it as evil. Yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah.
But as far as there's a certain when I face these things down in cases, I'm thinking particularly of Bridgeport when one of them was after the little girl and tried to get by me. I felt almost an alienness to the point of sterility. Those are the words that came to mind: sterile and alien. I didn't feel evil in anything but an objective sense. Now, I'm not saying there's no such thing as objective evil. Of course there is. But when it comes to these things, I don't think they're intentionally evil any more than a mosquito is when it bites you. I think they're trying to eat, but they're just extremely intelligent mosquitoes, as it were, and can push these buttons. And it sure pushed mine that day. And I've seen it again and again and again. Very often they're abetted by members of the household who are into the occult or, using sledgehammer techniques like Ouija boards, this sort of thing. But whatever the cause, positive. Ben and I call it the Peter Pan theory. Bring in happy thoughts. All right. And it works every time. I think I might
Paul,
have mentioned this on the other show.
how did you discover that?
Well, it was just a hunch. And as I was saying, I got rid of the worst poltergeist I ever dealt with, 1979, by using a joke book.
A joke book.
A joke book.
It was
Because
dad jokes.
now I wouldn't recommend that as a normal procedure. But in this particular case, it had pretty much run its course. There were 6 of these things.
Yes.
And the woman had done, this is in New Haven, Connecticut. The woman had done everything wrong. She'd had psychics and mediums in there. She would go in every day and fight the thing. She moved in with her sister during the worst of it. I said, no. So we tried to bring in positive energy, and we used the joke book. And the things were never seen or heard from again.
Jeez.
Now, that was the circumstance. So that really showed me that positive energy is the key. And again, even if we're all wet on this, positive energy is good for anybody, for any family in any circumstance. So, I mean, you can't lose in that sense.
Are there any good parasites, Paul?
Or interdimensional.
Well, that would help people.
Yeah.
Help.
Oh, yeah, there are plenty of positive entities. There was one parasite we ran into in Indiana that actually would apologize to the guy for having to live the way it lived. So, I mean, whether that was sincere, I don't know, maybe there was another button, but everything is out there. If you look at my 2019 book, Faces, I should say, Dancing Past the Graveyard, there were, I hated writing that book because there were things I'd never wanted to mention before. But, you get to a certain age, you figure, well, you don't mention it, you're never going to. So these were multiversal experiences having to do with multiple kinds of people and creatures, some of which I don't even have a definition for, that I could speak. There were language barriers. There were versions of languages I could get by in that I encountered. But most of them were either neutral or quite positive. Many of them were in worlds where the laws of physics were different, and it was not considered weird to talk to. In one case, the guy neighbors, his accents were all on different syllables than our version of English was, and he would say, just have a normal conversation. The context of that is interesting if we have time. That was again in the state hospital, St. Lawrence State Hospital, upstate New York, and I was. There was one ward that was pretty creepy. These are all old buildings from the 1800s anyway. And the staff didn't like to be there at night. The patients got all rowdy. And I said, I'm going to see what I can find out about this. I was talking with one of the women, Catholic women, who was a patient there. She wasn't a psych patient. He just didn't have the money for regular hospital. And she said she was a psychic medium. And I said, well, Catholics really aren't supposed to do that. She said, oh, it's fine. You couldn't argue with her. So she said that there was the creepiness was because of a man, presumably a dead guy, waiting there for his wife to pass away, and he was going to, quote, take her home. So I said, all right, standard garden variety 19th century spiritualist approach. So I said, I'm going to look into this a little more. Now, in this hallway was supposed to be a little chapel, a small undeveloped room with a skylight, and they had a couple of chairs and was a table with a cross on it. So I spent 3 nights, not the whole night, but a number of hours over 3 nights in this room. And the staff figured, well, he's a seminary student. Maybe he's in the chapel praying. I got away with that then. But I just went into a meditative state. I did not attempt to contact anybody. Total silence, total peace. And all of a sudden I hear a voice in my ear. Hello. Not hello, hello. And this turned out to be Gilbert, a man who was waiting for his wife. I figured, gee, could this lady be correct? but he was waiting for his wife across the river, the St. Lawrence River, in Prescott, Ontario, Canada. He was waiting for her to arrive by train from Montreal. He was going to take her home. So the woman was right, but her interpretation was totally wrong. Now, this guy was in apparently some parallel reality where you could talk to the neighbors, and I had trouble getting through some of his English, but most of it was pretty clear. At the end of several hours of conversation at the end of the third night, I actually heard a diesel locomotive approaching. Now, I had taken the train to Montreal myself many times from that station, although not apparently in his world. So then he just faded out. Presumably his wife arrived, they went home, and that was all there was to it.
Jeez.
I had never even heard of anything like this in the paranormal literature, in anything. I was so shaken. I went home. I didn't go back to the hospital for 2 weeks to do any pastoral work there, and I was just I didn't go to meals. The faculty was concerned. They sent somebody to see if I was okay. I didn't know what to. I did not process this, and in the book I go into other cases like that came in over the years, various worlds. In outside Buffalo, New York, a wonderful, very noble bear-like creature of whom I got a photograph. I was usually so bowled over I didn't set up any equipment on this, and who spoke a very strange form of Latin. Took me a while to get through. The case endings were all wrong, but from what I could get from his Latin, he was on a quest at the behest of a female deity. I never got the name. I never get his name either. And he was talking to various travelers on his way. Apparently, I was one. Now, the reason I was in this house at all was because people heard footsteps in their attic, and they assumed, it's going to be the guy who died next door. They already have it figured out by the time you get there. But that was so off base, at least according to my experience, that when you hear those footsteps or you got weird stuff going on, you don't know what it is. It may be something so bizarre that you've never even heard of it before. So this, and I can't stress the goodness and nobility that just radiated from this. So this was no parasite. This was a fellow being in the multiverse who was, again, in a world where the laws of physics apparently were such that they could talk to these travelers or whatever, and they didn't lock them up when they did it. Now, this female deity apparently would reward achievements in charity or goodness of some kind. Now, can you imagine a world where that kind of thing is rewarded to that degree? And he was headed, he said, I did get this much, for a place called Renthusia. And I've never encountered that before or since in any paranormal literature, except for this. So where that was and what precisely what the quest was, I never got. But just the communication, knocked me sideways. And I have incident. I never looked for this stuff, except to go quiet in situations where I felt it was appropriate, and you encounter these beings. And I've never seen it anywhere else. I don't know. Maybe I'm bonkers. Maybe people who experience these things are too limited in their paradigm.
So, Paul.
Yes.
So you had mentioned earlier about this shaman that could apparently, travel between, I think you said, timelines. So are we talking about like meditative techniques, astral projection? Have you incorporated some sort of practice into when you're dealing with, different entities that are causing trouble to communicate with them?
Well, that can be a very bad idea, communicating with them. I should emphasize that the shamanic tradition, you don't just read a few books and do it. You have to walk the walk. I mean, these were people who were brought up from childhood to be medicine people or shamans, and they really walk the walk. One of they will describe very similar methods. They will get into a whether it be a parallel state. They will often go into a hole in the ground and go down to a different world where, in the case of the one I was speaking with, there was a world where a woman who would come to him for help did not have cancer. She had cancer in that world, but not in the one he went to. He went to the one where she didn't have cancer. Literally, a physicist would say collapsed the wave function. The two worlds were joined, and she didn't have cancer anymore.
Wow.
That's exactly what he described.
Interesting.
The wildest thing I ever heard from, this is from two shamans. One is in Quebec, Canada, a Cree, and another, the other side of the planet, Mindalooey from Australia, said that they had known, they didn't do it themselves, but they had known when they were children, their local medicine people in their own communities had been begged by a family who had lost, in one case, a young son, in another case, a young husband, to bring them back from the dead. And they said it was not resurrection, it was not reincarnation. These people literally went into a parallel reality where the people had not died, grabbed them by the arm, and hauled them back across the membrane into our world. The guy in Quebec was a young husband, a Cree, and he would walk to work every day past his own grave. And this was, but it was not a good idea because the worlds were slightly different. He couldn't deal with it. I mean, there are reasons why the multiverse is set up the way it is. And he went running off into the blue. In Australia, it was a young boy who had died. Family was heartbroken and paid the shaman a lot of money. He knew it wasn't a great idea. But the boy, he came into our world and he had a couple of siblings he didn't have in the other world. He didn't know who they were. And it was not a good idea. And not to mention the fact everybody was creeped out.
So like with like the government and the Stargate program and them trying to do remote viewing stuff, are they messing around with this type of stuff, do you believe?
I think absolutely they are. Wouldn't we love to weaponize these things? To be able to appear to manipulate space and time in the face of an enemy.
Do you think they know what they're doing, or are they playing with fire?
Well, I think several different agencies are working on this separately. That often happens, okay? Just to see who comes up with what when. Yeah. And the man might not even be aware of each other. I think that there are agendas here that are not necessarily good. I don't know. I mean, I would be very surprised if the government is concerned with a spiritual and moral advancement as opposed to killing people. I'm sorry to say that, but I just don't have a lot of confidence that they're on the positive side here. So, yeah, I think there's a lot going on with that. As a matter of fact, in all the flap areas we research, from Rendlesham Forest all the way down to the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania Triangle, anywhere else, we always run into the military or something that looks like the military. They have their hands in it.
So it sounds like this is something, people could get in trouble with playing around. Do you think dreams are more than just something that's happening in your head? Do you think that's when people might be drifting off and between different planes or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that there is a real possibility of that. One of the things I've done for the last, I have a better part of 30 years is a dream journal that I've kept. Now, in the 80s, I was, when I wasn't involved with the military, I was a night news editor at the Providence Journal and the Metro Daily here in Rhode Island. So, and my wife worked 9 to 5. So I would get up, I would come home 1 or 2 in the morning from the newsroom. And then I would get up with my sons, Ben and his older brother, take him to the school bus. But I'd make up for it by kind of napping in the afternoon. A habit I still kind of do when I can, I have to say. But that broken sleep schedule allowed me to remember a lot more dreams. And so I'll go back 20 years in a dream. I'll read what I wrote about it. It'll immediately come back. And I found that I had whole lives in my perception going on in some of these places. One of them was a street corner cafe in Pennsylvania. My wife and I would stop there. We had life memories. We knew people. We could go about almost our entire day there. And I have no idea where it is in this world, or where I have, until 2016, I didn't spend that much time in Pennsylvania. It's a good clip from here. And things of that kind. Other worlds are very alien, we would say. But I think that we're in touch very often in dreams with what parallel lives we are living in whatever form we're living them.
Interesting. So what are your thoughts on CERN and what happened July 5th and what were they doing? Is that an evil organization, or do you think they're just a bunch of nuclear scientists?
Well, I don't really know. I don't have any inside information on that. Well, I kind of do, but it's one of those things I can't talk. But I don't think they're evil. I think that they're possibly playing with fire. But I think it's another layer in what the governments are doing to look into the multiverse, how it can be used, and what it really means. All right. Now, all they have to do is talk to some of the indigenous peoples, and they would get some proper guidance. But I don't think they're doing that. But CERN is it's kind of out there by itself. It's bizarre in many ways. It's found a lot of bizarre stuff. Very little of which the public knows about. But I don't think they're evil. I just think that they're pragmatic in a not so positive way.
I just found it, a little intriguing, all the Luciferian imagery that they've kind of put out there associated with CERN.
Well, they've put a lot of Hindu symbols and stuff like that from Eastern religions, because the Eastern religions, and this gets us back to religion. Religion at its root is really a reflection of the paranormal and of quantum mechanics in many ways as we understand it today. Particularly Friedrich Capra, the author of a couple of books on that sort of popularized quantum mechanics in the 70s and 80s, was drawing parallels. And today, Amit Goswami, who's been on our show a couple of times, will draw parallels between the faith of the East and what science has found. And I think that very often faith takes things that our remote ancestors knew and puts them in terms that we can understand today, and maybe makes them spiritual for us. As Graham Hancock has said, we're a species with amnesia. We are only just discovering these things that our remote ancestors knew, and religion is a kind of a reflection of that, I think, too. So, so I don't think they're evil. I think that they're just a little bit reckless.
So, who in the world is your paranormal hero, I guess?
Well, I don't often get that question, but it's an easy answer. I think that Jacques Vallée is probably my hero. He was talking about the concepts that we talk about 20 years before, and I didn't even know it. I encountered him in the 70s, and amazing. I'm sure everybody knows who he is. We actually got him to come on. We did a special podcast with him, and Paula Harris, his associate, well known in the UFO community. So I think, and Ben said, Dad, I've never seen you starstruck before, but you were when you were interviewing. So I said, yes, I was. That's not easy to do, especially not at my age. So Jacques Vallée.
Was he really the first person to adopt some of his theories?
Well, no, I mean, you can go back to 1895, Henry James talking about the multiverse, actually coined the term. There are, as I say, from ancient lore, particularly indigenous religions all over the world, the San and Khoisan Bushmen, the Andaman Islanders of the Pacific, and certainly the Aboriginals of Australia, they had these concepts. They put them in different terms, the dream time, or various gods and goddesses doing this or that. But the concept was there: multiple realities, us being involved in many of those, and us be and creatures that would help us, creatures that would harm us in these multiple worlds, and that's what we see. So we're just catching up.
So interesting. I find it interesting, the whole concept and how it could play into even cryptozoology with Bigfoot and the mysteries. And do you think that's a creature from the multiverse, Bigfoot?
I think it is. Yeah, we're very friendly with people like Richard Freeman, the great British cryptozoologist, kind of the Indiana Jones of the cryptozoological world, and he's pretty much still sticking with the physical explanation for these things. Really hard to find these things, and he may be right. But here I am in Pennsylvania in September 16th, 2016, and we were at the point in that case where we were just started on it that year. It was a flap area. We were staked out in different areas. In this case, it was just Shane Searway and myself on that first trip. And I'm up there in my truck, and I had a Bigfoot encounter. I mean, it was a brilliant moonlit night, Friday night, and there, the huge legs moving up and down, a huge hairy creature about 8 feet tall, with its head bowed as if looking for something in the tall grass. And then my wife blew it because she was back here in Rhode Island. She decided to call me in the middle of the night. And I said, I'm in the middle of a Bigfoot sighting. She thought I was kidding. So my ringtone is a theme from Lord of the Rings, so that goes blasting out over. Yes. Turn your phone off, Paul, next time. And so whatever it was gone. But we actually found the trail of a two-legged creature in the tall grass. Unfortunately, it wasn't soft enough for prints. But you can see where something came up, stopped, probably when my wife called, then turned around and went back into the woods. Now, interestingly enough, this is an area where people see UFOs. They have ghostly phenomena. And one of the people in the house, one of the houses on the edge of the field, this is a rural area, but it's not wilderness, was having all those phenomena take place, happened to drive in from the store when I was having this sighting. And she and her son heard something big moving through this field while I was seeing it, took out their flashlights and came up, and whatever it was gone. But I saw the flashlights and they were shining up into a tree. And we had a neighborhood meeting the next night, and I talked about this experience. And a hand went up, and it was the woman with the flashlight. And she said, oh, that was me and my son. I said, well, why were you shining them up into the trees? He said, but sometimes they, meaning the Sasquatch or whatever, are in the trees. So these people are used to this stuff. We got photographs of strange craft in the sky or whatever they were. We got a video in May of 2019. We're 3 years into the case, and this is available on YouTube on the Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno YouTube channel. And we got a good 3 minutes of something in the sky. Alexander Petikoff was there with us. He saw it. Shane Searway was there. He saw it. Chuck Credo from Seacoast Saucers of New England, one of the most feet on the ground people I know, was also there, along with a couple of local people. This is a cloud-like thing. A solid object came out of it and eventually went back into it, possibly an intersect point that we could see. But people in the area said that they have seen those sorts of things before. So all kinds of multiple phenomena of kinds not usually associated with one another going on there. The shadow people thing, so with Paul, with gratitude to Heidi Hollis.
So are you saying there may be areas where, like, I don't know, maybe the barrier between worlds is weaker, or these places of power or hot spots?
Definitely. The First Nations refer to these as thin places, where
Mm.
precisely what you describe is happening. I think that the whole, as John Keel said, the whole planet is haunted, quote unquote, in this sense. But we are, busy scurrying about our daily lives, and we don't often notice it. You'll find that people who, and you even see this in the hagiography of the Christian Church, who's a saint and who isn't. Many of the saints who were intellectual, like Thomas Aquinas or St. John Chrysostom, didn't have, as far as we know, as far as they said, mystical experiences of this kind. They didn't seem to be that much in touch with the multiverse. But some of the hermits and the people who were not necessarily approaching the faith from the scholarly perspective had all kinds of experiences like this. And they would interpret them in a Christian manner or whatever religion they happen to be. But they're still multiversal experiences, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think everybody is a multiversal creature. Everybody has experiences like this, but they may not notice them unless they're dramatic, because they're too busy. You go in and you put your car keys down on the table, you turn around to do something, you turn back, and they're at the other end of the table. In a few minutes, you'll forget about it. It's one of those things, right? Your furniture starts dancing around the living room. That you notice. But I think we're all part of this multiverse thing, and we all, but not all of us notice it. Not all of us
well, how can we
are
use
aware
it?
of it.
How can we use it to our advantage?
Well, that's a good question. In other words, how do you materialize the leprechaun and the pot of gold in your living room?
22 mil we were talking about.
Yeah, you're kind of interested in that, aren't you? But regardless of that, there seem to be limitations that we put on ourselves. I think that there are lives we're living, again, where all possibilities are real. There are lives where you do have the pot of gold, maybe even the leprechaun, right? And it's but it's part of our subconscious. That's how you could think of it. That's how Mozart could compose those brilliant piano concerti at the age of 4, because he's aware of that in his subconscious. And in that life he's living, I think it's just as simple. That this life we're aware of now is part of that subconscious. But I think we have to realize we are living different lives consciously at the same time. If you look back over your life, especially if you're my age, you seem to look at different parts of your life almost as different lives. Everything was kind of different. Even today, I think the multiverse is kind of like Swiss cheese, and I think it happens all the time. The Mandela effect, for example, I have that happen at least once a week. Something, because maybe I'm just getting old and senile or something, but I hope not. But other people will say the same thing. A certain thing was true that you saw in the news.
Oh yeah.
And then you read about it, and it has changed.
Well, there's always these popular ones. Like the latest one I heard about was Chick-fil-A. Used to just be with a C. Now it's a CK. And I remember it as a C too, just a C, because I do logos for a living. And I remember seeing and studying that logo, going, it was really clever. They just left off the K, and it was part of the whole logo. And now it is with a K. And I'm like, what?
Well, exactly. But I think, to get back to your original question, I think what we do with all this is not only to be aware of it, but to be as positive as we can. I think we can kind of steer ourselves through this maze of parallel worlds in our world family. I wouldn't expect, like Kafka's Metamorphosis, to wake up as a giant bug next morning, but because that's outside our world family.
Yeah.
I would expect to wake up in worlds where the laws of physics are similar, that sort of thing, where we would be able to deal with it. Right. But I think things can change. Things can change for the better if we keep it positive. I think the more negative we are, the more negative our other lives are going to be, and the whole super life, as we call it, is going to get more negative.
Well,
But-
I had a weird experience because I had a week where I had bought my best friend a new car. Just because I just thought he's been such a great friend all these years.
Gee, I just bought a new truck. I wish I'd known that before.
I bought a new Corvette. And I surprised him with it and gave him the plane tickets to go pick it up. And I felt really,
Father's a generous guy, Alex.
I felt good about myself, but I swear to God, 2 days later, I won a brand new car. Is that coincidence?
Yeah. I don't believe in coincidence.
No, I don't think it was a coincidence.
Yeah.
It was.
We make our own bed in the multiverse. The more positive we are, the more loving. I mean, it sounds hokey and corny, but I really believe it's true. So
the thing is, I won a car of equal value to the car I gave to him, and it was really kind of.
What are you going to do with it? You're going to give it to Alex, right?
Oh man, he'll get it all when I'm gone. He'll get everything. But the point I'm trying to make is that was a learning experience for me on good karma, bad karma, whatever you want to call it.
I believe in karma. Yeah.
I do believe me doing something positive for somebody affected my current life. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what we, it's funny. Some of the most profound statements I've ever heard have come from, of all things, Hollywood movies. It seems very unlikely because most of them are dumb. But in Gladiator, for example, he's talking to his officers before the first battle. The character, and he's saying, everything we do, what we do, echoes in eternity, and you could just as easily see it echoes across the multiverse.
Yeah.
And as far as the variety, why God would have whatever God, he, she, it, or them, whatever you conceive of God as being, as the source or creating a multiverse as opposed to just one universe. Morgan Freeman's character in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, of all people, is there in the English camp, and a little kid comes in and says, "Did God paint you?" Because he's black, right? And people in those days never would have seen. But in any case, he said, "Did God paint me?" He said, "Allah loves endless variety." It's a brilliant theological statement. So, and the people are always coming after me. They hear about my seminary background. And they always attack me for not having their religious beliefs. And I will say, well, the infinity that we see around us is theologically supposed to be because God's infinite love could not be contained. It had to burst forth. It could not be expressed any other way. And so if infinite love can create one universe, infinite love would create the multiverse.
Right.
All possible outcomes, all possibilities in a perfect elegance and balance, if you look at it. Just because we don't perceive that doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you, Hollywood.
Yeah. So what is your favorite aspect to the whole paranormal genre, I guess, the whole study of it? What really gets you going in the morning to keep learning, keep investigating?
Well, certainly not the money.
We already talked about that.
Right. But I think what it is the ultimate message of it all.
Yeah.
I think that the ultimate message is one of love and positivity, and the idea that no one can really die. The only thing that's really impossible in the multiverse is death. How can there be death, even for the body, when you're living so many different kinds of lives in your, as we said, super life, various facets and versions of yourselves? And the ultimate message is you are never alone. You are always loved. That's why I do it.
Oh, okay. I think I understood.
It was a little fuzzy here and there
Kind of deep.
for most people. But, yeah. You have to live it.
So in these multiple lives that we're all living in all these different dimensions, are we all doing similar things, or is sometimes we're doing the opposite thing?
Well, I think sometimes we're doing the opposite thing. Again, all possibilities are there. All possible outcomes are real.
We're talking jillions.
Yeah.
I know that's not a word, everybody, but
Well, it gets the thought across.
yeah.
Well, there is the concept among some theoretical physicists that when you make a decision, you are collapsing a wave function and you're starting a whole new universe. I take this mouse and I drop it on the floor, not only when I need a new mouse, but I'm creating a different universe, a different time stream, a different stream of material things and everything else that separates from the universe where I didn't drop the mouse.
Now you really lost me.
Oh, well, let me get you back. You're familiar with the old concept of going back in time and shooting your own grandfather, the time conundrum. How can I be born if I shoot my own grandfather, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's not how it works if you accept these points of view we've been discussing. When you go back and shoot your grandfather, you will have created another universe stream, another branch of the life tree, whatever term you want to use, where the guy dies, but the one in which he didn't die still continues. So, you're not going to like disappear. You still will have been born, but you will have created an entirely different time stream. And we are talking about jillions because every time anybody does anything, a new universe is created, a new version of it. That's good science today.
It's interesting. I remember when I read that Einstein, he hated quantum physics. I mean,
he couldn't deal with it.
He couldn't deal with it. He's like, I know it's real, but I hate it.
Well, he coined wonderful terms like spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
For quantum entanglement. And quantum entanglement is something that runs as a theme through everything we've discussed. And that's, how the hey do you have a particle on Earth that it seems to know all about a particle out in Andromeda somewhere or at the end of what the Webb telescope can see, and it's as if they're not far apart at all. It's like something that is beneath the whole notion of distance, and that would be multiversal.
Do you think by observing something you can make it real?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Okay.
And it's been proven.
So I just invented that principle. That was the Hajicek principle.
Well, there you go. Yeah, well, I'll go you one better. At one point, you are Heisenberg. Scampering around Germany and making all these wonderful.
Okay, but so we took this telescope and we photographed all these galaxies, and did we create those by photographing them?
Well, that's a double-ended question because what we're photographing may not even exist anymore. Because you get billions and billions of light years for the light to get here. They might have blown up by now or be eaten by Godzilla or whatever.
It's true. A lot of people don't think about that. When you look up at the stars, man, you are looking back in time.
You're looking back in time.
Yeah. I used to love the analogy, and I'm sure you've heard this when we were school children. Somebody said to me once, yeah, if you were on another planet, 50 light years away, and you had a telescope powerful enough to see on the Earth, you could watch dinosaurs eating. And I'm like, yeah, it's a weird concept.
Yeah. This is a kind of an aside, but there's a guy out there who claims he's cracked the problem of time travel, and he went back and saw dinosaurs. There was Stegosaurus and Brontosaurus and T-Rex and all species that did not live at the same time. They lived millions of years apart. So I love this guy. He's going back. Going back and he's looking at his the world a child might conceive of. But anyway, but there were probably parallel worlds in which those species did live together. So who knows?
It's interesting. Well, Alex figured out the whole time thing. He's 50. Look at him.
That's great.
He looks good for 50.
I had a friend in California. He borrowed a book from me, auto mechanic, and it said the physics of time travel. The guy has not aged a day since. I swear. I don't know. I guess I should have read that book a long time ago.
Yeah, and there's some weird things out there. I've got a story that's so insane that I'm going to put it. There's a guy writing a book with me about my life, and it's a story that's so crazy. I mean, I could tell it, I guess. So I was in Vegas, Paul, and I was at a trade show, and I went out to have a couple of beers before I, went back and went to bed because I had to get up really early. And a woman basically comes up to me and said, I've known you for 1,000 years. And I'm thinking she's a hooker or something, But she said, no, really. She says, really amazing. Really good to see you. Okay. So she proved it to me that she really did know me right then and there. She said, we need to go. Let's go across and just get out of here. And let's go just play video games or some over the Hard Rock. Okay. So we did that for a while. We just talked, very platonic. We went over, we had breakfast because I had to get up really early. And all of a sudden people started flooding in from the convention while they're having dinner. And she told me things that freaked me out, Paul. I mean, she told me things about everybody I knew, every injury I ever had. She said, you'll understand and you will believe me before you go home. So I had to leave that night. So I get in a cab, get packed, go to my hotel after the convention, get back, go to a cab. I'm getting in the car. The cab driver's sitting there with his hands over his face. He's just freaked out. And I said, dude, are you okay to drive? And he goes, yeah, I'm fine. I said, just take me to Sun Country Airlines or whatever. I said, what's wrong? He goes, oh man, I met this woman last night. And she told me that she'd known me for 1,000 years. It was the exact story that happened to me. And I ended up in this guy's cab. And that was my proof for both of us that what happened was real. True story.
Yeah. I get that day in and day out.
Is it? So that's something you've heard before?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really?
There was an alien, quote unquote, factor in one of the stories around here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, northern Rhode Island, not far from Boston. We had Joe Ferrier, who was a very well-known UFO figure in publisher of Probe magazine, locally here in the 1960s. Now he had on the station we're on today, WOON AM and FM. He had the afternoon talk show for over 50 years. And that's why Tim Beckley knew him, and he came up to be on. He came all the way from New York to be on our show because he wanted to be in the studio where he was with Joe Ferrier in 1965. So Joe talked about. He was on our show once, and he talked about stuff he'd never talked about before. One experience was when he was a young lad. He had met.
What? Oh, did we lose
in
him?
Their car.
Oh,
yeah, and
we lost you for a second there.
We lost you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he had met this what appeared to be a young couple, very strange, a lot of alien vibes. All right. So 15 to 20 years later, he's in Hartford, Connecticut, not too far to the west. And he was at this UFO convention. And the same couple who hadn't changed a bit said that they'd bring him home. Now, I don't know if I'd get in the car with them, but he was a brave guy, so we did. They brought him all the way back to Rhode Island. And pretty much small time, but they had the same kind of stuff in their cars, and they hadn't aged a day. And very alien vibes again. So there are all kinds of variations on these stories. But I know people who've experienced them.
Well, what was the purpose of that whole encounter? That's what I try. To this day I can't figure out because she was blonde, just so you know. She just seemed extremely intelligent, and she just kept telling me how good it was to see me again. So what was this all about?
Well, there's certainly a multiversal component. Now, the trouble is, if you start talking about living in different worlds, today we're still not up to that. So they'll fill your pockets full of antipsychotic drugs and off you go.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the whole Nordic alien thing is still out there. Some people might say it's a possibility that this was some sort of alien. If you read Preston Dennett's new book, Symmetry, which is very intriguing, it indicates that these aliens are involved in our lives on all sorts of different levels from time immemorial. So the 1,000-year thing may actually be correct, but it all depends on how you interpret it. I without having been there, I really can't venture a guess that would be concrete. But I think those two things are possibilities.
Well, the thing is, Paul, she not only proved it with her words, but then to get the double whammy to hop into this cab and have that guy describe her, everything she said to me, said to him. And to get us together, of all the cabs in Las Vegas, think about that. I mean, it was just like, this is really incredible.
Synchronicity with a capital S.
Oh my God. What a feeling.
See, but being a journalist, I would ask a lot of questions like, did these people know each other? I would try to follow up to find out who this person was. Did you do that?
I was scared of her, to be real honest. It scared me. I was scared the moment she started telling me about all the injuries I had ever since I was a kid.
Yeah. See, I'd be after that like a terror. That stuff doesn't bother me.
Well, this happened many years ago, and it scared me, to be real honest.
I might have been scared 50 years ago.
What was that? Yeah, what did this person want? Were they evil? Were they an alien? Were they God? I didn't even want to ask her any questions. I was kind of afraid to hear the answers.
Did you have any physical reaction? Did the temperature change? Did you feel?
No, I actually felt really comfortable.
Electrical tingle all over your skin.
This woman was as wholesome as they come.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was normal. I didn't feel other than fear of what the motive might have been.
Did you get a name?
I don't even remember anymore. Just don't.
Okay.
Because the experience was too powerful to even care.
See, I would have written a book about it.
Yeah. You know? Well, you could write a book, but it's going to be there's going to be in my book. And there's more details. There's more details to it. More things that we talked about, but I just had to accept that she was who she said. I had no memories of her, and she had a big advantage, and I was afraid. I would imagine that, in my mind, I could have just turned up missing all of a sudden. The whole thing could have been a scam. It could have been anything.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, today I think we're probably more skeptical about that sort of approach than maybe then, because it seems like every other person is a crook, which I hope is not true.
That cab driver, he was shook. He had his head in his palms and his head leaning against the steering wheel. He was almost in tears. He was that freaked out. And then, of course, can you imagine me getting in the cab and saying, "Dude, you're not going to believe this, but the same exact thing happened to me last night. I met the same person. I was
pretty bizarre
at the exact same time you were."
Yeah.
And here we are together talking about it.
I mean, was she a parasite? Falling back on our conversation, there have been cases where they've been very solid. If they're entirely in our world, I would say.
Yeah.
But this does not have the ring of that sort of thing, So
no,
I don't know. I wish I'd been there.
Yeah. Well, we could use that.
I would take care of the whole thing. Don't worry about it.
You'd arrest her.
Well, not unless she was out in a boat and I was still in the Coast Guard.
I do remember one question I did ask her, and this may make sense to you. To this day, it makes no sense. I said, "Who are you? What are you?" She said, "I'm a high priestess."
Okay.
Does that make any sense to you at all?
Yeah, I mean, even in those days, if Wicca was coming to the forefront, and there were all kinds of neo-pagan religions that had priestesses, so that could have meant anything.
But
Did you say high priestess of what?
I
Or
don't.
who?
I didn't even ask. At that point, I was really freaked out
Yeah.
because all the connotations that go with that, name.
You wouldn't have made it at any newspaper I ever ran.
Gosh. No, I was a horrible journalist at that point. I just wanted to kind of get rid of this person and
Yeah.
just go on with my life and then think about what just happened. And
How
then
old was this person?
I would say, well, I don't think I was more than 30. I don't think they were over 25
Mm-hmm.
looking. They might have been, according to her, she was 1,125 years old.
That's the number she gave you?
No, I'm teasing.
Oh,
But she
okay.
said she had
I
known
hope-
me for over 1,000 years.
Yeah. Well, maybe you're older than you think.
Well, obviously,
Yeah.
I'm showing my age for not bad for 1,000. But it was just interesting because I thought, after the whole event, after I got to think about it, I just thought I need to figure out what that all meant and what I was supposed to learn about it. I don't know, other than we live in a crazy, amazing world.
We do. One of the incidents in Preston Dennett's book Symmetry, Dolly, the subject of the book, was having all these experiences with aliens, happened to run across a painting by an obscure Scandinavian artist. And she remembers the aliens, according to her, taking her to a party when she was like 9 years old. And then all of a sudden she runs into this painting that she recognized as the party. It was painted in the 1870s by this obscure Scandinavian artist, and she saw herself right in the painting.
Jeez.
So these kind of bizarre things happen. And if anything, they indicate that we live in a very strange multiversal world. What we see around us is not what we get.
No.
There's a lot more to it. So that's really all we could say.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't know whether she was referring to some reincarnation situation. God knows. I don't know. All I know is that the story, the whole experience still gives me chills.
Yeah.
About it.
Well, life is full of mystery, and that makes it very interesting.
Yeah. So people wonder.
Never a dull moment. Yeah.
Wonder why I am the way I am and why I'm right now speaking with Paul. That's why.
Uh-huh.
I think
that explains a lot.
I'm looking for answers constantly.
We all are. Yeah. I think if you think you have the answers,
I don't. Yeah, no.
I think we're all kind of fools if we think we do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that drive for finding the answers, for
it's kind
savoring what the possibilities.
It's kind of a drive to get more data, more information. Yes. Even though I know I'll never solve any mystery, but it's like I need to get more data. I need to get more data constantly. More information, keep connecting dots. So maybe that's just part of our growth. And then maybe next life we get to kind of pick it up where we left off. I don't know. I have no idea what any of it means.
Yeah.
I think about my whole life, and I'm sure you do. Do you ever just sit back and go, boy, it's been a wild ride?
Oh, yes. All the time.
Yeah.
No signs of slowing up yet. But I think I'm always asking pain in the neck questions like, what constitutes data that is valuable?
Right.
What constitutes evidence?
Right.
Is in our paradigm is too narrow, perhaps, to answer those questions accurately. So everything is up there. The motto of our show is everything you know is wrong, and we include ourselves in that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, we're out of time. 12 minutes ago?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, but it was so great having you on. This could be 2 hours longer.
Well, thank you, Alex, and keep working with your dad. The father-son team is unbeatable.
Oh, I think it's awesome. I love it, and it's more than just working with your son. It's just kind of you get each other better than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Understanding. So, thank you, Paul, like 10,000 times for being willing to come on and shoot the paranormal crap, as they say.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. It's been a pleasure. It
Now,
always
why don't
is.
you tell everybody where they can buy your books.
Well, because they're on Amazon, naturally. Also, behindtheparanormal.com. You can get them there. We'll autograph them if that gives you a thrill. And we also have over 1,100 hours of free shows from 2008 all the way to today. If you're a long haul trucker, you're all set.
1,100 hours.
Yep. Because we were on. Yeah, we were on. We were in our 15th year. We were on CBS with a second show every week. Parallel to WON. So that kind of gave us a double whammy during 4.5 years.
That's a multiverse playlist.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah,
a lot of work. Still is.
People don't realize. I know how hard you do work for all your broadcasting, and so it's just really a joy to have you on. And you know damn well I'm going to ask you back. So.
Well, we're going to ask you back too, the two of you. I think that would be fun.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, we'd love to come on. All right, Paul. Thank you. Good night. Good night, everybody too.
Tune in next week. Bye.